Hello everyone and welcome back to the penultimate session of the Virtual Race and Wellbeing Festival with Love Trails Be More You in partnership with our sponsors Lululemon. We are here with Vybarr Cregan-Reid for what is going to be a really interesting talk over the next 30 minutes or so. Vybarr is an author, academic and broadcaster, and he's the author of two really fascinating books: Footnotes, How Running Makes Us Human, and Primate Change, How the World We Made is Remaking Us. I've been working with Vybarr over this summer on two really exciting projects. Vybarr was part of the team for the first ever Global Trail Running Day, and if you were involved in that, or if you read things on our website or our social media posts, a lot of that content was all written by Vybarr. And Vybarr has also been involved with us this summer with our online running course, A Good Runner, where he delivered 2-hour-long lectures as part of that course, which went down really well. So we all know that running is about so much more than how fast we go or how far we go. And Vybarr really kind of goes into this and poses some really fascinating questions. What if we wanted to design our run and our running training schedule and what we do to optimize the quality of our running experience instead of optimizing it to make us run quicker? What would that kind of run look like? Why would we want to focus on the quality of experience instead of focusing on our speed or some other metrics? So with that, I'm going to pass over to Vybarr for his talk. But just before I do, I would like to ask you, Vybarr, to share 2 words about how you're feeling.
Okay, I'm sort of going to cheat here because there's no English word for this, but I imagine it's one of those things where there might be a word for it in another language. But I'm both nervous and excited.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing your 2 words. I'll just remind people that they can pose questions to Vybarr in the chat box. So, as and when questions do come up, please put them in there because we will have some time at the end of this talk for questions. So we really encourage you to get involved and to engage with Vybarr and the content. All right, Vybarr, over to you. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, I'll just start sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, so Theo, can you nod if that's all okay? Thank you very much. All right. Well, it's lovely to be here. The sun is setting. It feels like a proper autumn evening here in London. As Theo said, I'm going to be talking for about 25-30 minutes. So we'll have some time for questions. You can either write them in the chat box and I'll do my best to read them, or you can just wait and you can ask them aloud at the end of the session. So I'm going to start very quickly by just saying a couple of words about who I am. As Theo said, I'm the author of, I'm the author of 3 books really, but the last 2 are the most relevant, both Footnotes and Primate Change. Primate change is obviously a pun on climate change, and it's about how the modern environment is really changing the human body. And before that, in 2016, I think it was, I wrote Footnotes, which is a very sort of broad-ranging book that looks at the other aspects of running that aren't often covered in traditional running books. So Footnotes isn't a book about how to become a faster runner, but I think it is a book about how to become a better runner, which is to better understand your body and to better understand the world that it tries to move through when it runs. Theo also said I'm an occasional broadcaster, and that's true. I've edited some live radio on Radio 5, but I've also made a couple of series for the BBC World Service that were loosely based on primate change, that looked at how different parts of the body were changing in different parts of the world. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about context and about why we are so interested in running, why we have to run, and sometimes why we find it so difficult to run, and why we have to do this thing called exercise. And the main reason really is that because our bodies and the environment that we're in are not entirely compatible. In fact, this is really what both of my previous books have been about, the fact that our bodies now find themselves in a new place, and we haven't yet learned how to live in this new place. So the title of the talk, the kind of advertised title of the talk, was Environmental Psychology. So we're going to be talking a bit about the role of the environment plays in our exercise. So one of the things that we need to understand about the human body is that our DNA is old. This is something that we know on a logical level, but I think it's something that's very, very difficult for us to encompass, because the speed with which the environment around us has changed and has become like a human-made environment. In the context of our lifetimes, it doesn't seem like it's happened so quickly. We can see the change happening slowly over time, but actually in the context of our DNA, it's happened really very, very quickly. And that's because our DNA is really, really old. Mammalian DNA is about 70 million years old. If you wanted to nitpick, you could say that our DNA, it belongs to Homo sapiens. And this is technically true. Homo sapiens have been around, well, a couple of years ago, people thought it was 200,000 years, but, you know, one of my colleagues at the University of Kent dated a Homo sapiens tooth. Recently was involved in the team that was dating a Homo sapiens tooth, and that was recovered and dated at 300,000 years ago. So Homo sapiens have been around for about 300,000 years. But the Homo family that goes back through, you know, Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Augusta, Homo Augusta, Homo erectus, and then to Homo habilis, that goes back about 2 million years. But actually, all of those extended hominin family, they all belong to mammals, and our DNA might be 100% human, but it's also 100% mammal because we are mammals. So human DNA has been around for an extremely long time, and for all of that time, except for about 150 years, for all of that time, our DNA has evolved in sympathy with a green environment. We have been living in and around green environments. The earth started to go green when algae started to evolve into early plant life hundreds of millions of years ago. And trees probably arrive about 400 million years ago. But even before then, actually, basic life forms that had spinal structures were already starting to evolve. So, you know, we struggle with back pain today, but having like a spinal structure that's evolved to move, that's even older than trees. So if we're all getting back pain, then it implies that actually it's a user error, not a kind of design error, but that's another issue. So what happened is that our DNA has been in and around natural environments for 70 million years, and it's evolved in sympathy with it. So what natural environments produce is what our bodies need for things like immunoregulation, for example. And what those natural environments need also is made and produced by mammals and by humans. So there's a it's not an environment which is a static thing, and there's not humans which are a static thing. You have like an interlaced ecology, a sympathetic ecology where one thing relies on the other. And then all of a sudden, like somebody tearing out a plaster, all of a sudden we have this thing, the Industrial Revolution. And we all know that the Industrial Revolution was a very important time of change for humans. But actually, I think one of humans' superpowers, one of our species' superpowers is empathy. And it's our ability to look at other people's faces and to read the emotions either that they're experiencing or that they're projecting. So it's been really important for human evolution, empathy. But one of the things that I think that humans are terrible at is temporal empathy, which is imagining what it would be like to live 200 years ago, or 300 years ago, or 500 years ago. So if you were imagining being a Roman, you'd just think, oh, well, yeah, so I'd probably be in sandals and it'd be a bit warmer. But really, I think what happened as the Industrial Revolution came along is it heralded so many changes, not only in the ways in which we relate to one another, but actually with everything around us. And because we exist in sympathy with our environment, that also means that our psychology has changed as well. This is why I think it's not possible for us to think like a Roman or to think like a Homo habilis, because our ideas of what counts as creativity or meditation or work have fundamentally altered. It's like there's a dead line that goes through our history, and it arrives about 200 years ago with the Industrial Revolution. One of the ways in which we might see our relationship with our environment changing around the Industrial Revolution was explored by a German philosopher called Martin Heidegger. And he's such an interesting character. But he said that one of the major changes to human psychology that happened around the Industrial Revolution, which was whereas before this background here, this had been our dwelling place, this had been our habitat, before the Industrial Revolution, and before maybe 20, 30, 40,000 years ago, pointing this out to a human would have been like trying to point out water to a fish. This is our home. This is where we're born. It's where we live, and it's where we die in natural environments. But once we start to break with that environment, once the Industrial Revolution starts to take hold and there's a shift away from that, this thing that we're looking at in the background starts to be called nature. It starts to be called green spaces. It starts to be called natural environments, because it's already something that's over there. It's something that we've become estranged from and we're distant from. It's like trying to, it should be like trying to point out water to a fish, or the sky to a skylark. And one of the lovely ways, so my background is in 19th century literature and history. And one of the lovely ways in which we can see this transition happening, at least in the poetry of the 18th and 19th century, is in a wonderful poetry. Yes, I do English for a living. Is in a wonderful poem by Alexander Pope called Windsor Forest. So I'll just read a little bit here. This is a poem written in praise of Windsor Forest. So whose ample lawns are not ashamed to feed the milky heifer. The lawns of Windsor Forest are not afraid, are happy to feed cows. Whose ample lawns are not ashamed to feed the milky heifer and deserving steed. The deserving steed, the horse that has done its work. The horse is a machine. And deserving steed, whose rising forests, not for pride or show, but future buildings and future navies grow. So this is a wonderful idea, that instead of a forest being a home or a dwelling place, actually what these sticks are They're future navies. These are things, these are future navies waiting to happen. These are trees that are yet to be chopped down and turned into ships, so that the grand imperial project can continue to succeed. So these are not trees, these are future navies. And what this is the idea that nature has become a kind of standing reserve of power that humans can exploit for their own benefit. So the Industrial Revolution has changed lots of things. It's changed the way that we work. Who could have seen that this is what we would all be doing this time last year? But it did fundamentally change the way that we worked. It certainly changed the amount of work that we did. Hunter-gathering communities do not work 40 or 50 or 60-hour weeks. They probably do about a 30-hour week. It's changed our bodies. I wrote the whole of primate change. Primate change. I wrote the whole of primate change, which is about how our revolutions in our ways of life have changed our bodies, everything from sort of about here all the way down our bodies to the very tips of our toes. It's changed our psychology in ways that I've just been talking about. And of course, modern life is really, really, really stressing us out. So what can we do about this? Well, one of the ways in which we can help ourselves is by partaking in some green exercise. Exercise has been called in a Public Health England report from a few years ago now. It's probably about 2015. A report was written and the title was "Exercise: The Miracle Cure," and it was seen as a miracle cure for so many reasons, because actually it's becoming clear to us, increasingly clear to us, that the reason that modern humans they might live a long time, but by crikey, they need a lot of medicine to be able to do that. Modern humans are, for all the health improvements and environmental improvements that we've seen, they are still, we're still very ill. We're still very ill. So exercise is a miracle cure for the body, but it can also be a miracle cure for the mind. And exercise, especially green exercise, can also be a means of reclaiming a little bit of what's been lost in our move into the modern world. So not to disparage the work of others, but none of the work that I'm interested in doing is about eating raw meat or drinking water from streams, or foraging for grubs. I mean, if somebody wants to do that, then that's fine. I don't really fancy it myself. I like a bit of cheese on toast. But what I am interested in is looking at habits and looking at behaviours that have worked for the body worked for the human body in the past, and cherry picking them or translating them into ways in which that are acceptable and usable, in fact, for modern humans. So we're interested in, of course, running today. Running is not the only form of exercise, but I would say that it probably is the perfect form of exercise. I think I've said and written and lectured elsewhere about the reasons why running can give you almost, it's like having the perfect health drink. It can give you almost everything that you need if you do it in a certain particular kind of way. As you'll see, I'm quite a keen cyclist, and there's even another bike there. And so I love cycling, but cycling is not as good for you as running can be long term. So running is what we're interested in, and the rest of the talk, we're really going to be focusing about how you can optimize your running practice to best take advantage of what it has to offer. And of course, it's Mental Health Day, World Mental Health Day. So we're going to be focusing on why running is good for mental health, and it's good for mental health for lots of reasons. We're going to be talking about some of these reasons, and we're also going to be talking about the reasons for some of these reasons. And of course, some of these reasons are chemical, biological, chemical, and some are functional. So the functional ones are probably the easiest to explain. You know that idea that you can only really use, that people only use 10% of their brain's capacity, and if we could only unlock more of our brain's capacity, then we'd become kind of superheroes. So this is sort of true, and it's not true. Our brains are, resources in our brains are basically, they're competitive, just like resources of energy in the body. So while you are working one part of your body very hard, like, I don't know, doing squats or something, it's much more effort to then lift additional weight as well. So if you're doing the squats and then you lift a heavy weight that you would normally find quite easy to lift, it becomes more difficult. But the human brain is a bit like the body. You can never use all of your muscles at once. The human body doesn't really work like that. I mean, you can get all of your muscles to tense up artificially by maybe licking your fingers and sticking them in a plug socket, but that's about the only way that you're going to get all of the muscles in your body to work at once. So there's no natural way that you can get all of your body functioning at the same time, and your brain is exactly the same. So we do only use a small capacity of our brain at any one time, and that's actually quite good for us. In fact, it's very, very good for us, and I would go so far as to say it's an evolutionary protection mechanism for us not to go completely crazy. So different regions of the brain, as you know, any neuroscience primer would tell you, different regions of the brain serve different functions, and we have different parts of the brain, like hypothalamus, hippocampus, the amygdala, the cerebellum, and they've all evolved at separate points in our history, and some of them are much, much older than others. The amygdala, for example, a little kind of sort of walnut-sized bit at the base of at the top of our spines, is our fight or flight sensor. I'm sure most of you probably know all this. But for example, if on a really, really bad day, your amygdala is telling you to be frightened, or if it's telling you that your friends don't like you, or that you don't really amount to much, your amygdala actually is the bit of your brain that goes off, you know, when someone stands, you know, just a bit too close, you know, like even on a tube or something, even when personal space is at a shortage, if someone's just a bit nearer that they need to be, that feeling of unease, that's your amygdala that's kicking off, that does it for you. So if resources are focused around the limbic system, this older system, if resources are focused around there, and if you then picked up 3 juggling, I wish I had 3 balls to do this now, and started juggling and tried to do some tricks and keep balls in the air, what would happen is, because, you know, resources in the brain are competitive, the amount of energy that the amygdala can co-opt to make you feel terrible about yourself is drained, because it's needed elsewhere to keep the balls in the air. So if you do kind of any sort of biomechanical exercise, preferably quite a complex one, just on basic functional terms, you will feel less stressed, because it's hard. It's not possible for you to feel so stressed whilst you're doing this other stuff. So that's quite a simple functional reason that something like running is very, very good for mental health. Going back to exercise being a miracle cure, it's been shown that exercise is better than drugs at doing lots of things that we just assume drugs are better at. So managing and preventing symptoms of depression, long term, exercise is more effective than drugs at doing this. It's much better at balancing serotonin, norepinephrine, and no, the other one's gone. It's much better at preventing heart disease. Heart disease is the biggest killer in the world. Of the 40 million people that die, probably about 10 million people die annually of heart disease. It's also good at preventing the onset of dementia. It won't prevent dementia, but it can delay it. It's also very good when it comes to some of the other big killers, like bowel cancer. Bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers amongst the cancers. The likelihood of you developing bowel cancer if you exercise 3 times a week, it drops by about 45%, which is just, it's absolutely huge. And then other big killers, other big diseases like osteoarthritis, high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, it can reduce those by 50%. And you might look at those and think, they don't seem so serious, but type 2 diabetes is way up there on the World Health Organization's chart of big killers. Osteoarthritis is like a gateway condition, really, because it makes it, anything that makes it slightly harder for you to move means that the gate gets just nudged open slightly for these other diseases to find their way in. But osteoarthritis is really, really serious. It affects about 3 million people in this country. That's that's 5% of the population. So it's osteoporosis is another one, equally damaging and also a kind of gateway condition. So exercise can help reduce stress levels, not only because it reduces our exposure to illness, but also because it does other things for us as well that will help us just to feel less stressed. Because one of the reasons that exercise is good for brain health is that there's a substance that gets produced during exercise. Well, a couple of things happen during exercise. One is that a process called neurogenesis is activated, which sort of pings fresh new brain cells into your hippocampus. But that's a whole big thing, and we haven't got time for that. So what also happens is a substance, a protein gets produced called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And because people can't be bothered to say that, they call it BDNF. And what this protein, what BDNF does is, it's like, if you imagine that you have the axons and dendrites of a brain cell, and they're kind of trying to reach out for other brain cells so that they can make connections across synapses. One of the things that will help these roots to grow longer, and for there to be just more of the roots, is BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a substance that's just like pouring fertilizer onto the soil, and encouraging root growth in a plant. And then there's also another protein called cathepsin B. That's called CTSB, and that's like having another fertilizer that helps the original fertilizer to activate. So cathepsin B, which is also released during sustained exercise, aids in the expression of BDNF, which aids in the expression of axon and dendrite growth in the brain. So it's just, in terms of mental capacity, running is really, really important and a kind of key psychological part of the benefits that a run will give you. So most of the running that we've been talking about so far, it could be done on a treadmill. I could set one up in here and just and jog away, and I'd be fine. I'd get all of these benefits. So this is partly true. You could go on a bike ride, and you'd get some of these benefits as well. But what researchers have found is that many of the benefits that we get from exercise, many of the mental health benefits that we get from exercise, are actually complemented, but are mostly enhanced by exposure to green space. And one of the reasons why running is the best exercise is because the level of exposure that you get is a 5 out of 5, obviously not 10. The level of exposure that you get to green space is a 5, and the level of kind of cardiovascular aerobic exercise that you get is also a 5, because it's a full-on sustained workout. So the differences between running and cycling, for example, is the intensity of the workout that you get on a bike is absolutely the same as running. You might kind of freewheel a bit as you come down a hill, but if you're coming down a hill, that means you're going to be going up a hill again very, very soon on a bike. So the workout that you get is more or less, the aerobic workout you get is more or less the same. How it differs is in the level of immersion. So the benefits of green exercise, which we're going to come to in about 5 minutes time, the benefits that you get from green exercise, their potency is affected by the depth of immersion in a green space. And the depth of immersion can be stratified in 3 ways. So at the moment, if you're looking at this screen, you're all at 3rd level immersion. So level 3 immersion would be when you are just looking at a green space, but you have no interaction with it. Some of you may be able to look out your window. Maybe if you're lucky enough to see a garden, but if you might be able to look out your window and see some greenery. But actually, greenery in a window and greenery on a screen, the fact is it's away from you, and it's indifferent to your activity. So you could be doing like typing or something, and the green space is just like a theatrical backdrop to it. So that's 3rd level immersion. 2nd level immersion is when you are in it. So like if you're on a bike going through forest woodland, for example, so you are like immersed in the green environment. You might be in a park reading a newspaper, so you're surrounded by green. So that would be level 2 immersion. Now, level 1 immersion, which is where you get the most potent impact, the most potent effects from green spaces, is when you are actually touching it, when you are properly in it. So like the levels of immersion for gardening, for example, you get a 5 for your immersion on that, because you are completely interacting with the environment. Your aerobic workout in gardening won't be so good. So you get maybe a 1 out of 5 for that. But with running, you can get 5 and 5, depending on where you do it. If you run on a treadmill, you'll get 0, but you might get a 1 if you're looking at a picture of a treadmill. So running in a green space is kind of the perfect exercise, because you get the full-on effect of the mental benefits, and you get an ideal effect of the ideal aerobic effect as well. With cycling, you get a very good aerobic workout, but you only get 2nd level immersion, because you don't actually touch the environment that you're exercising in. So that's how sort of environmental immersion works, that being in a green space is good, being able to see a green space is good, being in a green space is better, and actually engaging with the green space is best of all. And what is a green space? So what do we mean when we see a green space? Do we mean something that's kind of just like completely amazing, like the picture? This is a picture of the West Cliff at Lundy, which is an island in the Bristol Channel. And I don't know if you've been to Lundy. I've been a couple of times. It is really difficult to get there. I mean, you have to really want to be there. So you have to get all the way to the West Country, and then you have to be there at sort of 8 a.m. in the morning to get the ferry out to the Bristol Channel. So this is, this is hard for a green space. If you just want to go for a run, this requires a lot of commitment. But that's okay, because on the left in front of you, you don't have to run on Helvellyn. You don't have to run, and you have to go to the Lake District to run you know, which is exactly what I did do in Footnotes and in Lundy, actually. A green space, literally, when I went to, where did I go? I went somewhere, Michigan, the University of Michigan, to meet some like cutting edge psychologists, actually, cutting edge environmental psychologists. They told me there that actually a green space just means something that's got a bit of lawn and maybe some trees. So any park, any sort of green area at all will be enough to give you the benefits that you can get from green exercise. So what are these benefits? Sorry, we've run out of time. Sorry, bad joke. So what impact do green spaces, what impact can green spaces have? Well, there've been loads, there've been so many experiments, but I'm only going to talk about 4 or 5 of them here. One of the really obvious ones is that green spaces lower stress. Now, once you pair that up, as I talked about earlier, green exercise, once you exercise lowers our stress anyway, not only for functional reasons, but for chemical reasons, because it's better at balancing kind of the busy neurotransmitters in our brain. So it lowers stress because exercise is good for you, because functional activity when you're stressed out is also good for you because it gives your brain something else to do. But just going into a park and sitting in a green space will also make you feel more relaxed and less stressed. This is from a walk. The pictures from a walk I did about 2 days ago in a nature reserve at the end of my road. The picture makes it look a lot nicer than it is. So because these three things are doing, they all lower your stress levels. It means that actually they don't cancel one another out. It means that you get greater feelings of improved mood and relaxation from just being in a green space as well. Now, one of the this next one is really particular to forests, and it's rather than deciduous forests, it's mainly evergreen forests. But this comes out of Japanese research that's been going on for about 2 or 3 decades, really, because Japan has got so much forest land, so much woodland. It's 2/3 of Japan is still woodland. I think we're at about 7 or 8% woodland now in the UK, but Japan is 2/3. They've done lots of research there about experiencing time in woodland spaces. They call it, I'm sure you've all heard of this, shirin-yoku, which is forest bathing. And that doesn't mean going to the forest and having a bath. What it literally just means spending time in and around forest spaces. And what they discovered several decades ago was that if you spend sustained amounts of time in a forest, so like not just going for a walk, but maybe going to a forest and then spending a couple of nights at the forest and then leaving, they found that this could have an impact on people with high blood pressure, where it would bring their blood pressure down, and the effect would last for up to a month. This was without any drugs, without any kind of special interventions. It was literally just going to a forest for a couple of days, and their high blood pressure would come down, and the effect could last for a month. So this is amazing, you know, without any reversion to drugs whatsoever. High blood pressure can be brought down with just a change of scenery, with just a change of environment. So a researcher, a very smart young researcher, about 3 or 4 years ago in environmental psychology, again in Japan, sort of wondered and worried, like, so should, you know, women that are pregnant be going to forests? You know, pregnant women can often struggle with low blood pressure. And if forests bring your blood pressure down, then surely that would be quite a dangerous thing to do. She suspected that forests weren't dangerous at all. She did have this sort of default assumption that she was sure forests were just fine. But anyway, her study focused on what happens to people that have low blood pressure. And unsurprisingly, what she found was if people had low blood pressure, exposure to forests, to the phytoncides and the rich scents and smells of a evergreen forest, it could raise their blood pressure. So if you have high blood pressure, it'll bring it, forest time will bring it down. If you have low blood pressure, forests will bring it up. So this means that our environment, it literally changes the biology and chemistry in our bodies. It's not like, it's just a pretty scene. It's actually making a real impact on what's happening in your body. So it can help restore high or low blood pressure. There have been numerous studies as well in environmental psychology that have looked at the ways in which it can enhance mood and self-esteem, and work has been done on patients with PTSD and with depression. Just this week, actually, at the beginning of this week, there was a study that was published, that had been run in conjunction with the Royal Horticultural Society. The RHS had provided just a few plants to people that didn't have gardens. They just had yards, and I think they were given a couple of flowers, a couple of plants, and a tree in a tub to take care of. And what they did was they measured levels of cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that gets released by the body, and it suppresses things like the expression of BDNF, which is a bad thing. Obviously, it means that stress can basically make you stupid. That's not true, but it suppresses BDNF, so it can slow down axon and dendrite development in the brain. But what they found was that I think it was after about a month, they found that cortisol levels in the saliva had dropped really substantially, and in some cases up to 30 and 50%. And this was just kind of very minor, really very minor engagement with some plant life in and around their home. Studies were also done that looked at things like how quickly patients recovered from surgery in hospitals when they had a view of a green space, or whether it was a view of another part of the hospital that was grey. Unsurprisingly, the people that had the view of the green space needed less time in recovery. Studies done on productivity in the workplace, and they found that people that had like plants around their workstations were more productive, which just it seems insane. But it's such a simple thing, especially going back to that slide at the beginning where I talked the 70 million slide. You just think, well, of course we're going to feel much more relaxed with plants around us than when we don't have them. And I'll come back to the reason for that shortly. Green spaces have also been found to play a role in crime prevention. A study was done in the States that looked at
Hey, Vybarr, sorry
yeah.
to interrupt you. I just wanted to let you know that we've maybe got 5-ish minutes left.
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed the time. I do apologise. Yeah, okay. Studies were done on the amount of crime that took place in housing projects that had access to green space. Green spaces have also been shown to increase the production of NK cells in the body, and these natural killer cells are the cells that you have that attack things like cancers. And this isn't hippie stuff. This has all been kind of research that's been going on for years. So why do our green spaces work? Well, our eyes, green is the room temperature of our visual spectrum. It's the color that our eyes find it easiest to see. In green spaces, threat analysis isn't difficult. If we see a snake, we immediately know what to do. We either jump up in the air or we go around it. Also in urban environments, our limbic systems, not on a conscious level, but our limbic systems may not perceive them as being supportive of life. So I'll skip that one. So being in urban spaces just requires more cognitive effort. There's more stuff that we have to think about and assess. And so that means that threat analysis is more difficult. We don't need to worry about snakes and things, or pigeons or trees, but like what's around the back of that building is something that we would have to think about if we were out running. And even though we might enjoy running in urban spaces, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us in the same way. Green spaces are just beneficial. You get the advantages from them, whether you like them or not. And of course, there's the obvious one, that's air quality. And that's why where you do your exercise really, really matters. If you want to optimize your running experience, then run in the green, find a trail that you can run, and that's the way that you can optimize the benefits that you get from your running. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vybarr. That's great. Got a few really good questions in the chat, so I just wanted to pose them to you quickly.
Okay.
Someone's asked, are the benefits of being in green spaces affected with the onset of winter when there's less green colour? And then Anastasia has also messaged from Russia, where they have snow for 3 to 6 months of the year, and wondered whether that would have.
Yeah, green spaces is a very loose term. It applies to being at the seaside. It applies to being in the California or the savannah, which is all yellow. So yeah, it does. It's green spaces just means kind of spaces that are a bit naturey.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so snow too.
That's good to hear. A question from Kevin, who's asked, are the psychological impacts of green spaces still apparent and independent from the negative effects that will happen in a trail race? For example, if you're really hating life, feeling mentally destroyed, if it's raining, etc., or just having a really bad time on the race?
I think none of this really applies to racing. I think none of what I've said really applies to racing. I think racing, although you're doing the same thing where you're out running, I think if you're racing, you're really involved in another activity. And does anyone regret having been out when they come in? I don't think they do. I think even if the weather's horrible, when you come in, you still think, God, wow, I did that. That's great. So yeah, but racing is, I think, a slightly different thing than a kind of, racing is different to exercise. We might do exercise to race, but racing isn't exercise.
Okay. Do you think, is that partly because when you're racing, you can't have that soft fascination in your mind?
Yeah, it's because your attention is directed and focused, and actually you're thinking all the time about the strategy of the race, and most of these benefits come when you kind of power down quite a few of your systems, which you don't do in a race. In a race, you are on it and you are focused. So exactly, it's when you're not able to practice the soft fascination that I was going to mention. It was on the slide.
All right, thanks a lot, Vybarr. Thanks a lot for your talk. It really sort of fits in so well with the day, and obviously as trail runners, we are really big advocates for trail running.
All right, thanks very much for having me.
So, thank you very much. And actually, before we go, I would like to ask you to share 2 words about how you're feeling, and I wonder if they're any different.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not nervous. I think I'm still excited, and I can only think of verbs. Excited and yeah, I think I feel happy.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone.